Welcome to the SCAC Reminding Podcast, a series of short episodes with a variety of speakers, covering topics on organization transformation, entrepreneurship, people, and leadership. Hello, listeners. Today, we have Mr. James Engel, or as we know him as Jim. He's the Chief Learning Architect here at SCAC. Jim, what is leading in the future?
Welcome to episode 1 of Leading in the Future, where we'll talk about moving leadership from the industrial to the digital age. My name is James Engel, and I'm the Chief Learning Architect here at SCAC. And in these podcasts, we will share our view and approach to leading in the future in Thailand. We will go on a journey that starts from how leadership is slowly, or we would say way too slowly, evolving from that industrial age approach to the new digital age, and what new attributes our leaders have to exhibit to be successful in this new disruptive world. In this first podcast, we'll talk about that shift and that change in leadership. We're not going to take you on a history lesson in leadership, but you can't go wrong by starting with a quote from business guru Peter Drucker, who said, "Management is doing things right, leadership is doing the right things." It's a very simple but elegant distinction between leadership and management that has guided many of us for over 30 years. In 1990, John Kotter published the landmark book, A Force for Change: How Leadership Differs from Management. This further clarified the distinction between managing and leading by expanding Drucker's elegant statement into a 2-column model, defining the actions of a leader versus those of a manager. As you all may know, Kotter's leadership model had 3 distinct levels: setting a clear direction, aligning people, and then motivating and inspiring them into action through change. This model was the foundation for many leadership development programs through the 90s and even until today. But through the 90s, the internet exploded, and during that first decade of the new millennium, globalization, digitalization, and the Internet of Things caused dramatic changes in how business was done and how markets evolved. It became rapidly apparent that the old models of leadership were going to need to evolve and be enhanced to keep up the pace of change in the world. Now, lost in the crash of 2007 was a 22-page joint research publication out of Nebraska, Clemson, and UCLA entitled Complexity Leadership Theory: Shifting Leadership from the Industrial Age to the Knowledge Era. This paper recognized that even though the world had already been in a rapid state of change for some time, the leadership model still hadn't begun to evolve. Rather than read this entire boring paper to you, I'm going to summarize. Now, fundamentally, they recognized the increasing complexity pressures on business and leadership, and they proposed an emergent leadership framework that adds 2 more dimensions to the traditional leadership approach. Now, the traditional approach, based on the models such as Kotter's, they call the administrative or operational leadership, and it does focus on execution, as Kotter wanted us to do. But good planning and execution weren't good enough anymore. The speed of change and disruptions had exponentially increased, so they added another layer to deal with the accelerating pace of change and globalization. They called it enabling leadership, and it focuses on the leader creating an adaptive or agile space around them. This requires the future leader to catalyze, connect, and collaborate much faster and more effectively. The third layer, they theorized, should be around entrepreneurial systems and innovating, and they called this the entrepreneurial leadership, which very closely links to a design thinking approach to leadership. It's about creating new ideas, lots of them, socializing them with your customers or stakeholders, and then iterating it in a continuous innovation and growth cycle. Now, even at that time, the researchers could not foresee the speed, volatility, and disruption that was about to occur. The time frame for making changes to the business, which used to have a 5 or 10-year horizon, was no longer valid. Crises and radical changes did not come over long periods, but often suddenly, such as the tsunami here in Thailand, or the political unrest, or the floods, or now the COVID virus. Disruptive business models introduced by Airbnb, Amazon, Apple, and Uber came out of nowhere and caught businesses operating under the more traditional methods off guard. This caused giants such as Sears, General Motors, or even General Electric to shrink or nearly collapse due to the speed of the adoption and the weight of their own complex management and leadership systems. So that mass production, operational excellence, efficiency leadership model was being superseded by a much more customer-focused, personalized, agile, and iterative business process. And yet, when I woke up this morning and looked at myself in the mirror, I asked myself, how much have I radically disrupted and changed the way I lead my people day to day. And I saw that I haven't done enough. So out of this remarkably fast shift, a new way of leading is evolving that builds on this complexity leadership theory. So a few years ago, SEAC partnered with Dr. Bruce McKenzie of the Systemic Development Institute to define a more clear future leader vision in Thailand. Now, this extensive and validated research project engaged hundreds of leaders and organizations from across the globe and in Thailand, and led us to identify 6 attributes a Thai leader must master and demonstrate to successfully lead their people and Thailand into the future. In episode 2 and 3, we'll share those 6 attributes and conclude in episode 4 with ways that SEAC can help you build those critical future leadership capabilities in your leaders and your organization. Join me in episode 2 when we will talk about the first 3 leading in the future capabilities, which are the ability to build resilience through uncertainty and ambiguity, the ability to improvise and innovate, and the ability to collaborate and have conversations across generations, functions, and levels. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again in episode 2.
Thank you, Jim. And for a summary of today's episode, we have heard about the evolution of leadership, beginning with the administrator, operational leader, then to the enabling leader, which has to become more agile, and then in today's world, the entrepreneurial leadership. And with disruption, it caused a lot of organizations to rethink their leadership. And in our next episode, we'll be hearing more about this, about the 6 attributes of leadership. Please stay tuned.